Welcome back to my YouTube channel, Capitan West, where I talk specifically about military issues. Today I want to talk about a big military issue that's had a lot of people up in arms over the past few months. So 3 months ago, 4 tech executives from OpenAI, Meta, and Palantir, the CTO of Palantir, for example, the CTO of Meta, formerly known as Facebook, and a couple executives from OpenAI joined the Army Reserves, and they joined as lieutenant colonels. The Army has set up a unit called Detachment 201, which is supposed to focus on innovation. No one seems to be super clear exactly what Detachment 201 will be doing, but they've been hiring various tech executives, mostly into these types of senior ranks, such as lieutenant colonel. And a lot of people are up in arms about it. I'm making this video mostly because of a LinkedIn post that I saw and I commented on. And the original post actually equated this to the United States government hanging ourselves. It was a very sort of extreme take on what's going on here. And it was definitely the person, thinks very negatively of the fact that we are taking these tech executives and bringing them into the US military at this higher rank. And a lot of people were commenting on there, agreeing with the poster. I'll put the post in the description, so if you kind of want to see how extreme it is, you can see it there. And a lot of people agreed. I do think the poster, potentially just looking at some of their other posts, I think the account itself might actually be fake, but a lot of the commenters were not fake. They were clearly people, actual people who wanted to engage in discussion and were willing to talk. And so kind of the main theme as far as the reason that people are upset about this is people feel that these executives didn't earn this rank. So they didn't join the military at a junior rank and work their way up to earn this rank of lieutenant colonel. And I pretty much challenged most of the people who wrote that in there. And there were a few reasons I challenged this kind of criticism of them joining at lieutenant colonel. The first one is that we actually already have programs where people can join the military at senior ranks. So if you're a doctor or a lawyer, for example, there's actually other professions. I know people in like public health can also join at senior ranks, and some do join as much as lieutenant colonel. I remember when I was in my first duty station, we would always, this is a little bit harsh, but sometimes we would make fun of the lieutenant colonels that you could just tell that, usually at the hospital, usually doctors, that you could just tell like didn't have like a long military background. A lot of times they would, maybe not always be the cleanest shaven, or they would be texting while walking, which I think now you're allowed to do that, but at the time that was a big no-no in uniform. And so we used to kind of joke like, oh, that person's doesn't look very military. Maybe they just joined the military like yesterday. And a lot of times we would see this a lot in the hospitals. And that's the program exists. So it's kind of this, and I'm not sure if a lot of these commenters even know that this program exists. So they have this idea in their head of like, oh, we're letting people skip the ranks. We're letting these tech executives skip the ranks. And it's like, no, we've actually been letting professionals with a lot of experience skip ranks in general. There's actually a term for this. They call it service credit. And so basically the idea is that you get credit towards your sort of civilian work, counts as service credit, so that it can kind of count towards your ability to take on that higher rank. I know the Space Force is doing this a lot, and other services have done it, and basically you can do something called a direct commission to a higher rank. I don't mean to bore you with those particular details, but the whole point is that this does exist. Like this whole thing of bringing someone in at a senior rank based on their existing civilian experience is not, it's not this new thing that we're just doing for these tech executives. However, I think even pointing that out, a lot of people still disagreed with it. And so what I tried to kind of ask people is, okay, well, would you be just as upset if in a private company they hired somebody from, a different company, right? Like, for example, the CEO of the company I work for, Palo Alto Networks, he previously worked at Google. Like he was a chief business officer at Google, and then he had a short stint at a different company, but then he eventually came over to Palo as a CEO, right? And we're not mad about us bringing him on at a higher level. We're not saying, oh, he had to earn his stripes at Palo Alto Networks, right? So why are we so upset? I really don't understand this sort of limitation we put on the military, that we can't bring in sort of outside expertise. We can't bring in people who haven't been in the military. And in my field in particular, so I'm an officer in the Air National Guard, and in my role, I do cyber operations, and I would love to bring in more people from private sector who do the type of work that we do. For example, at the company I work for, Palo Alto Networks, we have an organization called Unit 42, and those people do very similar work to what I do in the Air National Guard. I would love to bring in people from Unit 42 or from other similar types of services, such as Mandiant and CrowdStrike, right? These people who do these types of incident response and proactive security services, proactive and reactive security services, just like we do in our National Guard squadron. It would be great to be able to bring these people into the National Guard. And guess what? They're probably not going to come in with no rank, or having to go back through the very basics of tech school again, just like you wouldn't in the private sector job. If Mandiant, for example, wanted to hire someone from Palo Alto, from Unit 42, they might give them a senior, incident responder title, right? And they might let them start working on incidents right away. But we don't let ourselves do that. We handcuff ourselves in the military already by not bringing these people in. And there's actually a lot of limitations in the ability to bring in that level of outside expertise in the military, which is one reason why this sort of opinion of all these people is really frustrating to me, because these people, a lot of these people that I saw commenting, I went and looked at their LinkedIns, and I maybe they don't put their military experience in their LinkedIn, but it seems like a lot of them have not been in the military, and they're, it's this kind of politicization of the military that really limits us, and we handcuff ourselves because some angry people are like, well, you didn't earn it, you shouldn't be in the military as a lieutenant colonel or as a, those people, maybe a warrant officer, if you didn't earn it, and you shouldn't be able to skip these steps. But in some cases, but the private sector does it all the time. And that's why the private sector, one of the reasons that the private sector gets a lot of the best talent, and we really handcuff ourselves in the military. So I don't know why everybody's so mad about the military getting this talent, these tech executives and all of the associated talent that they have. Now, I do think that I wish that we would kind of go a step further and really try to get access to the engineers, the people who actually do work. Executives are great, and maybe Detachment 201 will have some impact, but especially in the National Guard, it would be nice if we could figure out additional ways to get access to private sector talent, people who have the skill sets that we need, rather than trying to bring everyone in from zero and then build them up. Because guess what happens? A lot of people leave and they go to the private sector where the talent exists. So I'm definitely tried to challenge a lot of people on that. One thing that was interesting was that a lot of people said, well, this going back to they didn't earn it, right? This is so offensive. I really, one of the guys who was disagreeing with me said, this is so offensive to the people who have been in the military and earned it. Well, I'm someone who went the other way. I'm someone who started off in the military. I started off as a second lieutenant, the lowest officer rank, and I've worked my way to captain, right? And I've been in now 8 years in the military, and I went to work for a tech company, but I decided to stay in the Air National Guard, where I've been serving for 4 years. And these people are offended on behalf of me. But the thing is, it's not about me. It's not about these individuals. What matters is what's best for the military. And what's best for the military is to get the best people that we possibly can. Now, another objection that I saw, in addition to sort of this focus on people didn't earn it, was this idea that they're kind of take over the military. I saw a lot of people say that, like, oh, this is completely taking over of the military. And there's been some high profile cases, maybe half a dozen, maybe a little bit more, of these executives who've been joining the military over the last year. A big one in the cybersecurity community was Rob Lee, who founded a cybersecurity company called Dragos, and he also joined as a lieutenant colonel. And people are looking as like, oh my gosh, they're taking over our military with all these tech executives. Guys, there are hundreds, there are a lot of lieutenant colonels out there, and none of these people are commissioning as generals. None of these people are even becoming generals. They're not taking over the military. The military is still vastly people who were, raised in the military, worked in the military their entire careers. This is just a drop in the bucket. And it's great to get this additional experience, right? It's great to be able to bring in people who have a different view of the world. I saw a guy named Roger Miso, and he's listed, he puts on LinkedIn, his LinkedIn says that he's a director of development for the Marine Corps and Navy. I don't know exactly what that means, but he made a good point. He said, well, maybe if once these people join the military and they see all the nonsense that we have to deal with, the challenges with pay, the challenges with travel, the challenges with rigid training requirements and schedules, maybe they're going to bring in the perspective of, hey, we don't do this in the private sector, and we have, we're more effective, we have better technology than a lot of these military branches do, and we don't have all these stringent requirements. Here's things that we do to make people's lives easier, so that they can execute their mission, and they can, in the case of the private sector, build us a successful business. But in the case of the military, defend our nation, right? And so, I think having those perspectives, those outside perspectives people experience, really helps, because we kind of get into this bubble within the military of people just accept, well, that's the way that it is. And so bringing these additional voices in, again, they're not taking over. It's a few people compared to, hundreds of thousands of military members. And none of them are becoming generals. And sure, some of them are lieutenant colonels, but there's way more lieutenant colonels than them who are not tech executives. And they're just bringing that additional perspective. They're not taking over. They're bringing additional perspective. And I personally think it's beneficial. So the last thing I'll say on this is really what this kind of discussion showed me is unfortunately kind of a breakdown in sort of the communication and the ability for people to talk, communicate, and listen to one another. It was kind of disheartening to see some of the comments there. First of all, again, as I mentioned, a lot of those people, at least if they had military background, they didn't list it. And I was trying to present a different perspective, and I honestly thought, and maybe this is naive of me, I thought that people would be interested in my perspective, because I am in the military, I've been in the military, and I also work for a big tech company. I work for one of the largest cybersecurity companies, which is a Silicon Valley company called Palo Alto Networks. And so I figured, this is literally talking about hiring these tech executives into the military, and I'm someone who started off in the military, stayed in the military, but also joined a tech company. I have a pretty relevant perspective, a pretty relevant set of experiences that align with this. And it seemed like they didn't even want to listen. The people who had the people who were commenting, they'd already made up their minds, and they didn't care what I thought. They were offended on my behalf. They were like, oh, this is offensive to people like Wesley who have earned their way through the military. And I'm like, well, I'm not offended. I want to do what's best for the military. And I think adding these additional perspectives could be beneficial. And they didn't want to hear that at all. The other thing that was kind of showed me that there's really a breakdown in communication and in our ability to talk to one another was that I presented kind of all my counter arguments as questions. And I did this for a couple of reasons. One is because I don't really have a strong opinion on this. Despite what how I've sounded over the last few minutes in this video, I actually wouldn't say I'm a strong supporter of all these people joining the military. I think I would be more supportive if we were bringing in, as I mentioned before, actual engineers, actual incident responders, people for the Air Force, right? People from the commercial aviation industry into the Air Force Reserves and the Air National Guard, right? I would like to see more of that. I'm more focused on doers. I'll put an article in the description below where I talk about kind of how we really kind of have lost sight in the military of the fact that the doers are the most important people, not the generals and the people in charge. It's actually the people who are getting work done are the most important people in the military. So I do think there's kind of an overemphasis on executives here, but that's besides the point. The point is that I'm not a necessarily strong supporter of all these tech executives joining the military. I just don't think it's this big, terrible thing that they're trying to make it out to be. I definitely don't think it's the same as the country hanging itself, as the original poster said. So that's partially why I presented as questions, because I don't have a strong opinion on this. I'm just presenting some counter arguments. Okay, well, did you know, for example, one of the questions I say, well, did you know that we already have that we already direct commissioned doctors and lawyers into the rank of up to lieutenant colonel. Did you know that that was something that we already do? And nobody answered the question directly. Honestly, I think most of them, people did not know that. I think a lot of people here were arguing from a point of ignorance. And one of the people responded saying that I was just trying to kind of generate more disagreement I just wasn't just giving my opinion. If I just gave my opinion, that would end the discussion. And I was like, so you don't want to have a discussion? You don't want to actually think about what the right answer is here? That's kind of what that said to me is, they just wanted me to state my opinion. And he literally said, if I stated my opinion, the conversation will be over. Okay, so this is your solution for public discourse. You state your opinion, I state my opinion. And now we've completed, I'm not gonna present my perspective, you present your perspective, we ask each other questions, get thinking, and then maybe come to a correct conclusion, maybe discover something new that we didn't know before. Do we all just think that we just know everything and we just need to state our opinions and there's nothing to learn? That was kind of shocking to me, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of people feel that way. I think a lot of people have made up their minds. This is my opinion, you state your opinion, we agree to disagree, that's it. And that kind of sucks, right? There's no discussion, there's no learning and growing. There's no kind of getting to the right answer. There's no growth as a society and as a discussion. And you see that a lot on LinkedIn, right? Where people just kind of comment, people just comment, great post. I totally agree. Great point, right? There's no contrarianism. There's no support of, well, what do you think about that, right? Does that make sense? What do you think about this counterpoint? And I think we need more of that in our public discourse. The other point that I would make is that it also showed me that we really do live in a bubble, and kind of to go back to that point about LinkedIn, right? Everybody just saying good posts, right? People see that, and then so they see that and they see their posts, and LinkedIn just shows them the posts that they think they want to see, and then everybody just agrees. Well, everybody thinks I agree with this. And what makes me say that? So one of the commenters, I told one of the commenters, I was like, well, maybe I'm naive, but I thought that presenting my perspective, again, with my background that's highly relevant to this discussion, as well as presenting questions, which are thought-provoking questions, I think, related to this topic, and might get people to think, oh, I didn't know that we were already direct commissioning lawyers. Maybe actually it's not so bad to direct commission people from the tech world as well. Or I didn't know that this was just a small number of people compared to the overall military. Maybe it's not that bad to have that additional perspective. Right, nobody, and they didn't even engage with the questions directly. But the point is that I told him, I was like, well, maybe I'm naive for thinking that I can actually get people to think and potentially change their minds, or at least consider changing their minds, or consider another perspective. Consider another perspective might be valid. They don't necessarily have to change their mind, but at least they can see my perspective. Hey, that guy has experience. He's understands this field, and maybe that's a valid perspective. I don't totally agree with it, but it's an interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about it before. And the guy literally commented, he wrote, well, if you look at the comments here on this post, this is what he said, you'll see there's general consensus condemning these commissionings of these people. So you have a lot of minds to change. So he thinks that because based on this post, because everybody's agreeing with the original poster that this is bad, that there's general consensus, right? And I think a lot of people have this in their minds. They have this idea that they're in the majority, because we've gotten into this bubble where you just see more of what you agree with. And I know this has been talked about a lot, right? The bubble, but you just kind of get this feedback loop of what you want to see is what's shown to you on the internet. And so now you think that that's what everybody believes. That just must be true. And the fact that there might be a different perspective out there just seems foreign to you. And when someone like me, who is willing to be a little bit contrarian and willing to put something on LinkedIn, hey, actually, I don't think this is the worst thing in the world. They think, oh, well, that's just some crazy that's just some crazy dude. He's in the minority. He's just, he's the 1% of the 1% as far as his beliefs. But most of us, the vast majority of us, think that this is just absolutely terrible, that these executives are in the military or, have joined as lieutenant colonels. So I very much Unfortunately, I think that this was kind of a sign that our discourse is breaking down and people really aren't willing to talk to each other or learn from each other. And it was kind of sad. But I did want to make this video because I think that some of you who know me, maybe you don't have an opinion on this, and I thought that my perspective might be interesting. And when people ask me how I feel about this question, I'm happy to share them this video in the future, because I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to bring in tech executives. I don't know all of their experiences. I don't know if they have to deal with the same rules that the rest of us in the military do. I certainly hope so. I hope that they have to go through some level of military training, just like the people who become doctors do. But I don't know all those details. I really don't know, so I can't comment to that specific level. But what I can say is that this is very, very far from the country hanging itself. This is, bringing in a few additional people at a rank which plenty of professionals are brought in, and honestly, bringing them in at a significantly lower level in terms of responsibility and budgets they control, etc., than they have in the private sector. So it's certainly not, kind of elevating them beyond a level that they haven't already achieved in their private sector jobs. There's potential ethics concerns and things like that there as well. And again, I don't know enough of the details to know how much of that has been mitigated. I do know that I personally worked in government acquisitions, and everything was super scrutinized. Like if I had stock in a company, I was not able to be involved in any kind of procurement decision related to something that company could be involved in. So there are a lot of checks and balances there to make sure those types of things don't happen. But again, I don't know enough of the details to know exactly what's being implemented within Detachment 201. I do know, as I've said a few times, this is not us hanging ourselves. And the idea of bringing in additional perspectives, of bringing people into the military, not making it this, you have to be grown in the military to work in the military at a maybe more senior level. I think that's a good thing. And I think that we should try to bring in more people. Like if we could bring in people from, incident responders from the private sector into my squadron as warrant officers, that would be great. Like I would love to see that happen, because the military has this idea that we literally call it, when you leave the military, you call it getting out. It's like getting out of prison, right? You're getting out of the military. We have this idea that you come in through the military and there's this one-way door, this exit, one-way road that you leave the military. So the idea of joining the military later in your career, coming back, even when you leave and come back, they have something called a break-in service. So that's my opinion. My opinion is, let's try to encourage bringing in great talent into the military from external, and if that requires giving people a rank commensurate with whatever their sort of level of responsibility is outside of the military, I think that's totally fine. We do it in the private sector. Why can't we do it in the military? We're only handcuffing ourselves if we don't allow ourselves to do that. That's Wesley's opinion. If you feel differently, put it in the comments. I would love to hear differing opinions. Don't be surprised if I engage you and ask you some tough questions. But I also want to hear counter perspectives, and I'm happy to engage in them as well. Happy to have that conversation and continue it forward, because that's the only way that we get better and the only way that we learn. So thanks for watching my video. I'll see you in the next one.